Doug was one that many of you may not actually have the pleasure of having known much. He comes to our morning services, but not as much now due to health reasons. He wanted to come in person for that. And when I asked him, I said, you don't have to because he's got his health issues now. And he's like, I'd love to, because one of the things that I can't do, I can pray lots at the moment, but I just miss doing ministry. So being able to just sit down and answer a couple of questions for 10 minutes, he was more than stoked. And if you're someone as a member of this church, and he's probably got your name on one of the member lists we give him, and he's probably prayed for you, which is pretty cool to think that somebody you haven't even met has prayed for you before. So big thanks to Doug for doing that. But we're talking today about being connected, and we're looking at John chapter 15, which is one of my favourite passages. Before we do that, I just want to know, who loves a good meme? Like, I reckon memes are just awesome. Now, some of you might be thinking, gee, you are a millennial, but memes are big for the millennials, and I think that they're big for every age group in a sense, because they just keep being funny, and if something gets not funny again, a new movie comes out with a funny moment, and they start bringing out new pictures and little punchlines, and you can't stop laughing. Some people used to think Facebook was just for memes. Now they've made their way to Instagram and all the different spots, Insta stories. So I've just got a couple of my favourite ones to show. See, the sad reality of memes, though, before Riley puts them up, the sad reason that they're funny, for a meme to actually be funny and make you laugh or want to send it to a friend, is that they have to have an element of truth behind it. They have to have an element of, something like that, where you're like, you shouldn't have said that, or yeah, that is true, and you sort of laugh and sigh at the same time if you can relate to it. Christian memes are no exception. My favourite ones are Christian memes. Love a good Christian meme because you can laugh, but I've been grown up in the church, I've been a youth pastor for a long time, so I relate, unfortunately, to some of the memes. I've got a really good mate in Adelaide who he'd come and spoke at our camp, actually, with our youth group. But we send each other memes all the time, and these are just some of the ones that we've sent each other. So we're always going to put a couple funny ones up there. So churches on Mother's Day, churches on Father's Day. Now you go to church on Mother's Day and everyone's all happy and there's flowers and it's all about encouraging. And then Father's Day, there might be a happy Father's Day in the welcome, maybe, if you're lucky. That's very consistent across a lot of churches everywhere we go. So that's a good one. What's next, Riley? Me complaining about, a lot of these are youth ministry specific ones, sorry. Me complaining to Jesus about a student that went to youth group across town last week. Love it. Next one. Jesus watching you blend a Happy Meal and making a student drink it. I possibly have been guilty of that before in my youth ministry more than once, and it was hilarious and disgusting. When somebody asks you your favourite part of living under the new covenant, salted pork. I was hoping they'd get more than a laugh, and to be perfectly honest. Nobody likes prosciutto or anything here? Okay. Yeah, we'll go to the next one then, Riley. After visiting a Pentecostal church, you guys, I'm like really filled now, you don't even know. You could ask me, like, Kelly, can you say something in tongues? And I'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And angels would know exactly what I'm saying. Oh, you're not laughing quite enough. That's an office and a ministry meme. And it bags out Pentecostals a little bit. I sort of just have everybody in the right one. But this one got me the other day. A couple of weeks ago as I was praying, unless there's one other. Is there one other there, Riley? Is there one in there somewhere that says something about another meme? There it is. Bang. And this one I didn't laugh at. 13-hour Netflix show. Prayer, worship, scripture. I just don't have enough time. And like you, I didn't laugh at this one because I watched that season in 2 days. Yeah, a bit sad to say. I was sick is the only example I'll give. But for those that don't know much about Stranger Things, who loves Stranger Things? Oh, nowhere near as many hands went up as I thought. Who doesn't watch Stranger Things? Couldn't care less. Yeah, okay, who's just on the fence? Okay, awesome. Yeah, good stuff. Well, I love Stranger Things. It's probably one of my favourite shows. Like, I'd put in my top 5 favourite TV shows. It's really cool. Has all these like montage and references to the 80s, which I didn't live much in, but I did watch a lot of movies from that era as well. But it's crazy because it was actually a TV season of movies. 8 episodes it was. 8 episodes of Stranger Things, 13 hours. Do the math, and that is way longer than what a TV show should be. I remember starting each show, and you know how you sort of look how long to go? And I'd be looking, and there's like an hour to go still, 20 minutes in. I'm like, boy, oh well. And then I'd continue to watch it. The last episode was 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think. And I remember getting to, and you have to finish these shows before someone ruins it for you. Because the worst kind of friends to have in your life are people that ruin Netflix shows because they all come out at once. So I knew I had to commit, and I made time to finish those last 2 episodes that came out, and I got through them and just suffered the next day because of a little bit of lack of sleep and that. But it's just fantastic. The twist with Stranger Things, you can't watch all of it too late at night because it's darn scary in certain spots. So if you don't love horrors, I see Emma judging me there when she turned around, but I find it pretty scary. The very first time I watched an episode of Stranger Things, I was at my in-laws' house, and they got this house like out in the middle of nowhere at the time, and it was pitch black. You can't see a thing. And this massive storm happened, and I thought, this is a good time to watch a scary show. And scared the bejeebers out of me. Absolutely freaked me out. But we live in an age where everybody says that they've got no time, don't we? We live in an age where people talk about that all the time. It doesn't matter if you were young, it doesn't matter if you were old. They're like, I just don't have the time. Or if you ask them, how have you been? They're like, really busy. I don't think I could fit anything else in my schedule. Yeah. You talk to another young person, you talk to an older person, you talk to someone that might be retired, funnily enough, and you say, hey, you're going like, just busy, really busy. We run different activities at church, we put different things, you should come to this, like, yeah, if I have enough time that week, I will. I'll let you know the day before, something like that. It's a common response that you get all the time, isn't it? But it's interesting, is there enough hours in the day to fit everything in? And as we're talking about being connected to Jesus, is there enough time like this meme to fit in 13 hours of a Netflix show, but do we have enough time for prayer, worship, scripture, or are we just saying that we don't have enough time for anything? So I said we're looking at being connected to Jesus. We're looking at being a disciple of him. And the thing about discipleship is that you can be a disciple to anything. It's not just a disciple means that you're a disciple to Jesus. You can be a disciple to anything. And one of the questions I want to tap into today is, are you a disciple of Jesus, or are you more a disciple of entertainment? One of the biggest things that can pull us away and distract us. See, Hollywood's very interesting. We see all these people that say that they have no more time. They're out of time. They can't fit anything else in. If they had to commit to whatever it be, just say, let's use a prayer meeting, for example. We want to get into a 30-minute prayer meeting once a week to pray for their church or their community. Many people would say, I don't know, that's going to be really hard to squeeze in. But Hollywood's really interesting because they know about what people are like. And they're like, people don't have much time nowadays. You know what we're going to do? Instead of doing a weekly TV show that people watch once a week and fit into their schedule, let's put everything out at once. We're going to call their bluff and we're going to see if they're going to watch our material. So what they'll do is they'll put stuff out, and they've created the lifestyle of binging. Who's binged a TV show before? It's what you do now, isn't it? Yeah, I do it a lot, so I'm guilty of this just as much. I preach this to myself before I preached it to anybody else. But that's what they do. Disney, Netflix, all of these big companies now, they're deciding how you spend your time. They're not going, if people have time for this, they might watch it. They've even taken so many of the ads out of their actual streaming programs because they go, we're not going to let the advertisers pay us when we put it on once a week. We're going to have our own system that goes to everybody and as much content as we want to give them. And we're going to saturate them with content and watch how many people are actually going to use it and spend money on it. And it's made them a darn lot of money. So that's what we have to wonder a bit today. Is our lives, is it full of something so busy, but when something like a Netflix show pops up, all of a sudden we're happy to make time for that. But are we making time for Jesus in our life? Is our heart committed to being a disciple of entertainment or a disciple of Jesus? You may be here and you may be exploring Jesus, and I hope that you are here exploring Jesus, and a very special welcome to you. And if you're trying to discover what he's like, you might be listening to this and thinking, what's so bad about watching Netflix binges? You've hopefully come to the right night because you can hear what Jesus demands of his followers. You can hear the calling that Jesus has for his followers. Sometimes you might have been at church and we say, come to Jesus, his grace is sufficient, come to Jesus and your life will be changed and everything will be awesome forever. But we don't, sometimes when we tell someone to come and accept Jesus, we don't tell them now. This is what Jesus demands of your life. And we don't tend to say that. So hopefully you're here on a good night where you can go, okay, they're going to tell us what Jesus demands of his followers. So I'm glad that you're here if you're exploring faith or Jesus. If you are a follower of Jesus, though, if you're someone that wants to be a disciple, if you're someone who wants to be a better disciple of Jesus, then I hope tonight can be challenging for you. I hope tonight you can be challenged like I was challenged, looking at memes, funnily enough, and reading this passage over and over again as I thought about preaching it. And I hope you can see and be challenged in a way that will want you to draw closer to Jesus than where you are right now. So the question I want to ask is there a visible difference in your life because of Jesus? Is there a visible difference in your life because of Jesus? And does it shape who you are and what your life looks like? Does Jesus shape who you are and what your life looks like? And I want to get beyond the idea of just a follower of Jesus just being someone that's a good person who doesn't swear or acts badly in front of other people. I sort of think Jesus is a lot more than that. He doesn't just want to create good people. And I know stacks of good people that aren't Christians that would fit into that category as well. When you read through the New Testament, when you read through the Gospels of Jesus, the people that had their lives completely sold out for Jesus were more than just good people. And they actually were more than just friendly to other people. In fact, sometimes they weren't really being friendly in a good way. Like they were standing up for the poor and the oppressed, and they had to be quite nasty to some other people in order to stand up for it. So I want us to think about the changes that Jesus actually makes in our life, and that it goes beyond the being a good person kind of thing. You see, Jesus was incredible. When he came into this world, he wasn't just telling people to be a good person, but he told an alternate story to what people were living. He told a different story, a different way of life. He told about a different way that would transform people from the inside out, what it really meant to have him as their saviour, and how that would become fruit that would be seen by other people. Before we continue any of that, though, I want to look at this passage and look at these verses. This is a funny one. When I was in school, this was my school motto. If anyone goes to a Trinity Lutheran college, this is their school motto still, I think. And it's, I'm the vine, you are the branches. And I remember going to school and thinking, that's a cool verse, I suppose, probably because we're Mildura. And never thought much of it. It's probably one of my favourite passages in Scripture now. And I could just keep reading this, and it always just challenges me, but also fills me up a bit. But we're going to read this passage now. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You're already clean because of the word. You're already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. You see, we see here, Jesus is talking about fruit. He's talking about that our Father God is the gardener, and that when we get this image of God then tending the vine, looking after the vine, I am the vine, my Father is the branch. When he says I am the vine, that's Jesus referring to himself. So throughout the book of John, he's got what's called the 7 I am statements, where he refers to himself to teach a lesson about what he is and who he's like. And here he says, I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. Now, I'm not much of a pruner or a gardener or that sort of thing, but I'm slowly starting to learn now that I own my own house. But I know that they don't put up with branches that don't have fruit. And the best way, this baffles me as I've learnt gardening actually, is when you cut something off and it grows back and there's actually stuff on it that time. And sometimes you need to cut off something that's not producing anything. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment when we talk about pruning. But it's just a powerful thing. Remain in me as I also remain in you. So Jesus calls him to remain in him. And he talks about us not being able to bear fruit by ourselves. We'll touch on that a little bit as well as we unpack this verse. But this word remain is one that's really interesting to focus on. This word remain is one that isn't the same if you look at different passages of this. Some of them say, abide in me as I abide in you. I was looking up some of the different ways that you could talk about this passage, what some of the different verses or definitions might be if you track it back to the original. One of the ones I loved was this saying, remain in me as I remain in you. It's like saying, make your home in me. Jesus is saying, make your home in me. Home is where we settle. Home is where we go to be comfortable. Home is where we go and find that place where we're like, I'm home. And we feel that contentness almost. So Jesus wants us to make our home in him. And we need to think, as we're talking about discipleship, so we're talking about where do we be disciples? Are we disciples of entertainment? Are we disciples of something else? Or are we disciples of Jesus? Where are you making your home? Where are you remaining? Where are you abiding in Jesus? Just in case people haven't quite understood it at this point, the audience that Jesus is talking to, he builds on it in the next 4 verses. And he sort of says the same thing, but he's a bit clearer in some ways. And he goes on from verse 5 and he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He finally tells us which bits we are. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So Jesus picks off, he continues, he sort of just builds on what he said, but just, makes it a little bit clearer and he points it back to us. We are the branches. So he starts talking to that. He wants us to find our home in him. but he also points out that he is our life source. You see a branch, if you don't know much about gardens, if you don't know much about vines, you see them everywhere if you just drive around the outskirts of Mildura. And you'll see it's just been pruning season. And you'll see there's so many branches that sort of get fallen down or they get cut off and they're on the ground. And you know what I notice about those branches when I drive past? When I go to my footy club, you see them everywhere because it's just vines all the way up to Cardross. And there's stacks of those little branches on the ground and not one of them's got fruit on them. Or if they do, and you drive past a week later, that fruit's rotting because they just cut it off. And try and plant a tree. If you want to plant a new tree at home and you just cut off the branch and stick it in the ground, it's not going to grow if it's that its life source isn't there. So the challenge for us there is that we are the branches. And how are we to grow if we're not constantly connected to Jesus? How do we grow if we're not constantly connected to Jesus? So we're going to talk about that part as well. But and he also talks about the intense thing that he talks about there is that if it's thrown away when branches are not connected to the vine, that they picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. And that's the sad reality of what a life without Jesus looks like for us as well. It's a perfect analogy there. If we have a life without Jesus, then we won't get to have eternity with him. So we need to truly find our home in Jesus. We need to truly be transformed as a branch to become like Jesus. You see, we're followers, like last bit there, and this is where it ties into discipleship really well. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So we have a challenge here. Are we bearing fruit? Are we producing good fruit? So the things that we produce, there's parts in Galatians where it talks about the fruit that we produce as well, which I could talk about, but I don't want to get too off track. But think about, what are you producing in your life because you're a follower of Jesus? What are those things that are coming out of your life that are blessing other people, that are helping people see Jesus in you? So I think the simplest way to do it is people seeing our fruit is pretty much how people are seeing Jesus seep out of us because we make our home in him. So where are people seeing evidence of Jesus? Because of the fruit you produce. So that's where people need to see Jesus. The fruit we're producing in our life is showing them Jesus. So are we producing fruit? So I want to focus on three things. I'm not usually a point sort of dissector sometimes when it comes to messages, but this one, there's just three sort of key parts that I want to dig in to this passage as we're looking at it. That I hope challenge us, that I hope inspire us, and I hope help us to want to be better disciples of Jesus. And the first one is keep growing deeper into the vine. We need to keep growing deeper into the vine. For those gardening, that you'll find the healthy trees and the unhealthy trees. I remember when we moved into our house, and there's a few things in my yard I liked and there's a few things I didn't like. So there's a few that I'm like, I want to get rid of that tree. So I go over to it and I'm trying to get rid of it, and I'm expecting to dig a deep hole. I'm expecting to axe and hack at a lot of things down there, or buy some chemicals that'll kill it, something like that. And I get to the tree and I go to pull it up and it literally just comes out. And I found out the root was like this deep. Like, I don't even know how it was standing. It wasn't a very big tree, it just looked ugly. And when I pulled it, it just diminished because for that tree, its roots, it didn't go very deep into the ground. The branches didn't go deep into the tree. And it's very much like Jesus is saying. So we need to keep growing deeper into the vine, which is Jesus. We need to keep growing deeper into Jesus to have a stable, solid foundation built on following Jesus. So we could be like those plants you can just pull out, and because they've got no root structure and they haven't gone very deep into the ground, that means that they could easily be pulled out. They could easily be pulled off the path like we can in our faith. All of a sudden, challenge, hardship, storms come our way, much like Doug said. And if we don't have roots that are deep into Jesus and we understand his character, his love and who he is and why even bad things might be happening in our life, we will fall over like a tree that doesn't have a good root structure. But I remember there was another tree that I didn't like in our yard, and I had to get that out, and gee, that almost killed me trying to get that out. I probably should have rung someone up. I had to dig all of around it, get the hole kind of deep. I'm sure there's an easier way to do it if I knew what I was doing. Dig around it, and I had to get like this, I don't know, I think it's called a hoe, an axe sort of thing, but it wasn't the one with 3 spikes. It had the flat bit. Anyway, I'm hacking at it, and I'd just leave it after half an hour, go do some stuff, and then 2 days later, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get it this time. It probably took me 3 or 4 times like that, and I remember when I finally got it, but underneath this tree, you could just see all the roots that were like going into it. And it wasn't until I finally found this one, I don't know if it's called a main root or not, but this one that was bigger than all of them. It wasn't until I cut that, all of a sudden I could wobble it a little bit, and I was finally able to get that tree out. But it was darn hard. It was such hard work to get this tree out of the ground. But it's because it had a firm, solid, deep root structure. So we need to keep growing into the vine. We need to ensure that we are constantly tapping into Jesus, learning more about him, learning what he was like, learning what Jesus said, learning even the things that we don't understand. We need to learn what those things meant. If we're to believe in Jesus, then we can't just go on with our lives and hope that everything will change us. We need to truly invest in going deeper into the vine. That's the cool thing about Jesus, but also the daunting thing. He leaves that up to us. He leaves that part to go deeper into him up to us through our worship, through our Bible reading, through our prayer. But you know what? There's a lot nowadays where I think people, when we see less authentic disciples than we do in the New Testament in the book of Acts, because people like to fit in this, people like to go deeper into the vine when they think about when it's convenient for us. They think, oh, if it's convenient for it, then I'll connect close with Jesus. If it's at a good time that fits around my work schedule, then I will grow deeper into the vine. I think about reading scripture and trying to have a good devotion thing. It's crazy. Doug even still put it so simply, just praying and reading the Bible. But that is how he's constantly continued to grow deeper into Jesus throughout all his life. So how do you grow deeper into Jesus? Is it something that comes after you've been entertained? Is it something that you would never think about spending an hour in prayer? You'd never think about spending an hour in reading the Bible, but you wouldn't mind watching 13 hours of Netflix in 2 days. Now, there's obviously a different purpose in some ways, because watching Netflix and that does help us turn off, helps us sit back and recharge a little bit, because I can tell you, reading scripture for what it is doesn't always help us recharge in the same way. It will fill your soul, but you'll be challenged quite a lot there. But it can point out where our priorities lie. How are you going deeper into the Jesus? What are the things that are stopping you from growing deeper into Jesus? What are those things that you find that are the excuses? If you were to have a conversation with a friend and your friend said, what is it that stops you from getting to know Jesus more? What are the things that stop you from becoming a better disciple of Jesus? What are those distractions and things, if you had to list them, that you would say there? Is it being too tired in the morning? Is it being too tired at night if you want to have it at night time? Is it not having enough time? But then I think one of the really good things to do here, and we'll chat about this in a second, but what does your time look like, and what are the things that you're giving Jesus all your time? What are the things that are taking your time away from him? But the fact is that we need to make sure that we are going deeper into Jesus. This comes from serving. This comes from reading his word. This comes from catching up with other people and talking, not about the weather, not about how good the cats were yesterday, but catching up with someone and talking to them about Jesus, praying with other people. It can be creative. It doesn't have to be as simple as you sitting home alone and just meditating on the word, but there definitely has to be time for independent Bible reading. But how are you going deeper into the vine like God calls us to do here? Another thing that stands out to me from this passage is that we need to keep growing deeper into the whole tree. We need to keep growing deeper into the whole tree. Thanks, Rolly. So one solitary branch, it's not really a sign of a healthy branch, is it? I don't know if you guys look at the vines in Mildura or you look at any tree, because you can apply this same idea to other trees. But if you just see this one tree, say it's a lemon tree, and you see one branch coming out of it, maybe just with a couple lemons, maybe it's got some good fruit, and there's 4 lemons coming out of that one branch, people aren't really going to look at a tree with one branch and say, gee, that's a healthy tree. Gee, I wish I'd be like that tree or have that tree in my life. They don't look at that and say things like that. So that's why it's so powerful about Jesus. It's very tuned. He doesn't say either. He doesn't say, I'm the vine, you are the branch. It's not what the text says. He's using a plural term. He says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Because he's saying that we are meant to be, so a branch can't bear as much fruit as it can when it's amongst other branches. So I actually had a vine on the side of my house that I recently got rid of, just because I think that's what you're meant to do in winter before the spring comes, so it's manageable. It was affecting my TV reception in the shed a bit too, because it wrapped itself around the TV aerial. So I got over, and I couldn't believe how intertwined all the different vines got with each other, and how much that they started jumping onto this. Is it called a lattice, that thing that goes against your shed? Yeah. And it was tying up there, and different branches were tying onto each other, and it was really hard. I thought I got one, and I cut it, and then there's another one there, and then there's another one, and they were just all over. It was incredible to see the structure of branches that supported each other. I couldn't just yank some of these from the bottom, because there was another branch that held onto it, and another one. And it was a lot of hard work to get these branches pulled away. But you see a healthy tree, a healthy vine, and there's nothing healthier than Jesus. But if we're living in community, if we're trying to follow Jesus in a church that is the body of believers, then he is the vine, we are the branches, and we rely on other branches to have a healthy life with him. So I think that's another problem today, though. So many people today live to try and be a solitary branch. You would have heard people say many times before, people talk about how we're connected better than everyone. Like, we can call people on the other side of the world, we can chat to people instantly, we can tag people in funny jokes and all this sort of stuff. We don't even have to catch up with someone's latest goss all the time, because we saw, oh, you guys had a baby, I saw that on Facebook. You know, you sort of see the key things that happen in their life without having to talk about it. So we're more connected to people than we ever have been. but you'll hear people say we've never been more alone. You see, it's so easy to live an independent life now, and this is so true of people's discipleship and faith. See so many people trying to be a solitary branch and try and live a life that's still going deeper into Jesus, but they're sort of swaying in the wind. They're sort of in this point where they can't be as strong as possible because it's just a solitary branch. They try to bear their own fruit completely on their own without anybody helping hold them up. You see, the local church isn't designed to be a place where we come and consume and get great worship, great teaching and leave. So I reckon that's an example of being a solitary branch, just coming to church, loving it, okay, see you next week, and going. And that's just a bit. We consume the worship, we try to learn a little bit for ourselves and go out and try and live it in our own life. You see, the local church was so much more than that. Jesus intended so much more for his church than that, because it wasn't to entertain people. It wasn't just to fill them up. That was part of a purpose, to fill them up and encourage them. But the local church there was the gathering of believers. It was the people of Jesus. It was his disciples gathering together to build each other up and to make an impact in their communities together. Just read through the book of Acts. One thing I'm doing at the moment to learn about, I'm trying to learn what it is that those guys in Acts had that we don't have now. And I'm just reading Acts. It's always my favourite book, so it's an easy read. But I'm reading Acts and then I'm starting again. And I'm reading Acts and I'm starting again, just until it really catches on. But you'll notice with them, they're always in pairs, they're always in groups, they're always praying together, they're always eating together. They just do everything together. It's just incredible how much they do. You see, we need a church to have connection with believers, don't we? If we want to find the other believers in our life, we need to find those at the local church. We need a church to have a community of people around us to keep us accountable, to encourage us, to spur us on and to remind us to keep our eyes on Jesus. See, I've got another big community around me. That's my footy club. But I can tell you, they are not encouraging and spurring me on to be more like Jesus in my footy club community. That's why the local church serves that purpose. It's helping people help us be better. So people today, they think that they can build their faith without regularly connecting with other people. And I think it's setting themselves up for failure if we're to fall into that trap. So churches connecting with others regularly, it's sort of become an optional part of faith, especially coming out of COVID. We're not quite sure why it's this. I think it's because people get comfortable in their own space. But coming out of COVID, every church is seeing it. We're seeing that less people are coming back, more people are watching online, which I'm a massive advocate for online church. But you're seeing more and more people not wanting to connect with other people. They're more comfortable consuming and being able to watch on their terms, learn the topics they want to learn about, and try and live their faith out that way. But I don't think that's a faith that has the ability to go deep into vine and connect with Jesus. And it's not a faith that is connected to the whole tree. So you can give an hour of a week as well, and it won't really help build your faith. If you're just connecting with your local church that once a week, sort of like that time where I've noticed a lot of plants, again, in my garden, you learn so much when Scripture points about this. It's because so many people have experience with gardening, with farming, with all of these. That's why it's in the Bible, because it was an easy one to get. But I noticed, I thought my sprinkler system was connected to everything. There was this one rose that just wouldn't grow. It was just sort of not, it was growing very little bits at a time. But then one day when I was pulling some weeds out, I realised the part of a sprinkler that was connected to go there had actually been knocked. It was probably my dog digging in the garden or something like that, but it wasn't getting to the rose, so it was getting no water. So nothing was supporting it and helping it grow deeper, and it was dying as a result. So we need to be connected to the other branches. We need to be taking things in regularly, not just an hour a week. We need to be praying. We need to be reading Scripture. We need to be catching up with other people, and not as something that we can fit in, but as a priority in our life. Not as something, oh, that sounds nice. I'll do that if I can fit it in, but it needs to be a priority. Do you have a place to serve? Do you have a place where you can tell other people about the gospel? So we're watering down and diminishing the church if we don't respect its purpose. So we're watering down and diminishing this idea of a local church if we're not connecting with other people and being like branches. So we don't want to be I'm the vine, you're the branch. We want to be branches, connecting with other followers of Jesus regularly. Not just 1 hour out of, I can't remember how many hours there are in a week. It's like, is it 96 or is it more than that? Something like that anyway. But we don't want to just connect with other people that 1 hour of a week. We want to do it constantly, because church doesn't just finish when we have our little service on Sunday. It's not 2 hours a week when we've got the evening service as well, so we can get 2 hours in that week. We need to connect in other ways, whether that be through community groups, whether that be just catching up with coffee through other people. This one's one that's just so practical. We need to be getting the most out of our church as we can, so that we can also give the most to our church as we can, so we can see it grow. The last one, and this is the one that sort of cuts deep, no pun intended, but we need to be prepared to be pruned. This is the hardest reality to face, I think, when we read this. So we love being comfortable. I think there's so many disciples of entertainment in this world. So many people, I fall into that trap so much myself, of being more a disciple of entertainment than I am to Jesus. But we need to be prepared to be pruned. And we don't like that idea. It's not comfortable. There's nothing comfortable about a pruning process. It's not something you go, oh, this won't mind. It's like why people put the dentist off for a little while, because we know it's going to be uncomfortable. It will make us feel better. It's better for us to go to the dentist and get a filling. But it's really annoying when they give you the needle in your mouth and put the filling in and you've got a numb lip. But that's sort of the same thing that we're talking about here. We need to be pruned to be healthy. We need to be a healthy tree. We need to be pruned. So we need to see pruning too, not as a punishment, not at a bit where why does Jesus think that he can tell me which parts of my life he can be involved in and which parts he can't be involved in. So it's a necessary process to be a healthy disciple. Pruning's necessary. So what is it that you can prune in your life? So where is it in your life you need to prune something back? So what is fascinating about this passage too is when he's talking about pruning, there's a section where it talks about pruning and he doesn't say that Jesus just prunes the unhealthy branches. That Jesus doesn't just cut off all the unhealthy bits. But he says some parts of the tree, even parts of the tree that do bear good fruit, he prunes so that they can be even more fruitful. And you read that and you think, gee, what does that look like in my life? What does it look like to cut a piece of my life out that is fruitful, that is doing well? What would it look like to prune that so that there is another part of my life that would be even more fruitful? For cutting something back, maybe all of a sudden you've got more time to hear from God and you hear the thing that he has for you in your life. So I think we just try to look at the real negative things in our life. If you look at that passage, Jesus says that we will need to prune parts of our life that bear fruit. And he's obviously talking about fruit and things that represent him. What are something that we need to cut back that we would never have considered? We actually need to think, gee, I need to cut that part out of my life. We need to be prepared to be pruned and be bold enough to actually take that step and prune something in our life. Just imagine what cutting your Netflix subscription would do to your faith. Just making a real practical one for a minute. What do you reckon your faith would look like, your regular life with Jesus during the week? What would that look like if you cut out your Netflix subscription? Just wonder that just for a minute. What would it look like for your time? What would happen if you took a serious audit of your time and you looked at the amount of time you give Jesus each day, the amount of time you give work, work's important, the amount of time you give sport and hobbies and just entertainment, that sort of stuff. Just have a look at what would happen if you took a time audit. I've actually done this in the past and felt very guilty after doing it because it's not a good thing. But what would it look like? I think some people even need to prune sleep sometimes. I talk to some people, especially teenagers, sorry to point out teenagers, but they get an awesome amount of sleep. Like I remember back when I was about your age, if you're a teenager here, and I used to love getting to 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, oh, this is awesome. I didn't have to put up with the morning. That's the way to beat mornings. You sleep through them. And I don't know if anyone else was like that when they were around a teenage age, but especially when holidays hit, you just love to sleep as far. And instead of being ashamed, like I am now when I get up too late in the day, you look at it, it's almost like an achievement. You sort of walk around with your chest out a bit in the morning because you've made it to 12:30 even one day. And you're like, wow, that's very cool. But is there garbage as well in your life? So there's good things we do need to prune out, but as we're thinking about these practicalities, what are the things you need to prune in your life? One thing that I really had to prune out in my life that I had a problem, well not a problem with, but I didn't even think it was a problem, that I just being consumed by this world of entertainment, that I knew I had to cut out, was there was a game, and this was years ago now, called GTA 5. Don't know if you've heard about it, it's the most popular video game known. Don't know if you play it, I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up, so don't worry, it's a safe place here. But I used to love playing GTA 5. I can see why people think it is one of the best video games, because it is phenomenal. But it is filthy and full of garbage. And I didn't take this seriously until I worked at Danton. So I worked at this school called Danton Public School, 98% Indigenous, like stacks of kids with stacks of problems, family violence, drugs, alcohol, sexual assault, everything. Like it's just very depressing if I talk deeply about the issues that they've got there. But these kids love their video games, and it's a great way to connect with them. And they love getting on computers for free time and looking up videos. And one of their favourite things to look up that we had to ban, and I had to keep telling them to get off, was to stop watching GTA 5 videos of people running around and beating up people and all this sort of stuff. And I'm telling them off. I'm like, you can't watch that. That stuff's filth. Don't look at that. And they're like, do you play it? And I'd played the game. I've clocked the game. Sort of embarrassed to say now. But they asked me that, and that was the moment right there that I thought, I need to get rid of this in my life, because I didn't want to lie to the kids. So I sort of, what my response was actually, so I didn't lie to a kid, I said, yeah, I do, and I know how bad it is, and I know you shouldn't be playing it. And then hopefully it became a discussion and a teaching moment where I said, I need to not play that. And I told them that I'd stop playing it the week later, because I was like, wow, just me playing it probably endorses to those kids. And it probably didn't do too much. I don't know. You can never judge how much something actually does to your mental state and what it's doing to your mind and what you think's okay and not okay. But I can tell you, for those kids that were watching videos, they wanted to be just like Trevor. And Trevor's this character in it, and I couldn't name a filthier character I've seen in a movie or TV. It's like this guy. And they thought everything he did was hilarious. They thought everything he did was cool. And they wanted to play games like GTA on the playground. When I saw how much that infected somebody, that's what made me think, well, why am I giving time for that in my life? So that's something, I just pruned that straight away. I uninstalled it on my Xbox. They're starting to talk about the sequel and online and all that, and I just do not have a bar of it. Because I'm not one of those, what's the word? You'll meet some people who are really good at pruning, and they won't let kids or thing have any sort of, leeway in that sort of section. And I'm not, don't sell any. Like, I had friends that didn't watch The Simpsons, and we hated going to their house at 6 o'clock when we had to go for dinner when I was a kid, because that's when The Simpsons were on. But I can see why some people do that. But I think GTA is in that category. There is no way a follower of Jesus should be playing GTA. And I used to play GTA, and I would have played GTA at some point when I was a pastor as well. That's a really embarrassing thing to say. But that's why we need to look at those things that we're tolerating in our life. Look at those things that we're tolerating to pull us away from Jesus, and actually be bold enough to prune them. Be bold enough to be prepared to be pruned. So stuff like that can have such a big impact on our minds. And also look at it, I don't mind spending time on something like, I've been watching a bit of Modern Family on TV lately, and that's hilarious. I love spending that time. And I don't look at that and think, oh, okay, well, at least I'm not spending time on other things. But then I look at it GTA and I think, well, this is time I could be praying. This is time I could be reading my Bible. This is time I'm taking away from Jesus, from serving, from my family. Think about what that is taking, and is it worth it? And is something like that that's, pretty filthy morally, is that really something I should be spending my time on? And I was very convicted in that moment. It's funny how you can be convicted by kids at a school that aren't followers of Jesus, and how Jesus can use those sort of things in an incredible way. So what is it you need to prune in your life? Where do you need to be pruned? Where do you need pruning in your life? So this passage tells us that God is the gardener. The question we ask is, where does God want us to be pruned? It talks towards the end of that. It talks about God saying, when we finally get this, when we are like the perfect idea of the vine and the branches, then you can ask anything and we will get whatever we want. And Jesus isn't saying, as we grow deeper into the vine, then you're sort of in my good books and you can then ask to get a Lamborghini and you'll get a Lamborghini. Just pray and it will be done. That's not the intention. You see, if we get to this point where we connect with the vine, if we try to connect with the vine more than ever, if we try and connect with the whole tree and with all the other branches, if we get prepared to be pruned, if we have this sort of image of that perfect vine, then that's where a huge difference will be made in our life. And that's where we will have the heart of Jesus. And it's when we follow those things, it's when we have the heart of Jesus, that the things we're asking for isn't just a cool car. The things that we're asking for isn't just something that we think we need more in our life. We're having the same heart of God. Maybe the things we ask for there is then for more people to come to know Jesus. Maybe the things when we have that true heart is hoping that we can tell somebody about the gospel that day at work. Maybe the things that we start to ask Jesus is just repeatedly praying to keep our eyes off sin. So what are the things that you need to prune in your life that aren't producing fruit? It might not be something that's quite so physical. It could be something like pride. Pride could be a really big issue in your life. It could be something like lust. Lust could be something that completely pulls your eyes off Jesus, completely takes hours of your time all the time. Greed could be one of those really big things. You know you've got a problem with greed. You can't be generous. You can't give your money to anyone else. There could be so many different things. And I could just go through a massive list trying to hit every single one of us. But we know the things in our life that we need to allow to be pruned. One of the preachers I listen to, her name's Jenny Lusko. She's the wife of Levi Lusko, who's both phenomenal preachers. But she talks about the battle of the Spirit of God versus the desires of our flesh. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is the battle that we always have. We've accepted Jesus into our life. We've accepted the Holy Spirit. And we get this idea of how we want to live. So we've got the Spirit of God and the desires of our flesh, but they're constantly at war within us. We're constantly having to tug between the two things. And she describes them as two dogs fighting. It's like we've got two dogs fighting with us. One is the Spirit of the Lord. One is the spirit of flesh. And they're always constantly at battle. And sometimes your actions are decided more by the spirit of flesh, and that's when that dog's winning. He's on top. He's winning the fight. But sometimes the Spirit of God is winning. That's when your life's looking good. It's where you felt like, I've had a couple of days without a sin here. I'm going pretty well. And you're feeling really good about what your life's looking like. And that's a battle that never goes away. That's a battle that will always be a part of the Christian life. And it's something we have to learn to deal with. When you think about which one actually wins, which one actually gets on top, because there is hope. There is hope to be someone like that video we watched of Doug, to be a man who can be 93, and so many people, I can tell you, most of the members at this church that know him, or all the members of his church that actually know him, look up to him in an incredible way. We can be like that. We can be someone that heaps and heaps of people look up to in that way. You see the key to that dogfight that's going on between us. There's nothing pretty about dogfight. But you know the dog that wins that fight? You know the dog that'll win the fight in the desires of our flesh and the desires of the Spirit of God? It's the one that gets fed. The dog that gets fed is going to be the one that wins. So if you want to have the desires of our flesh and that dog that's fighting in this battle within us, that's only going to win. The desires of our flesh are only going to win if we keep filling it with what it wants. If we keep giving it the things that it asks for, the lusts, the desires, it's things, those words in our things that says you can have that. Giving more time to entertainment, giving more time to comfort, giving more time to all of that different stuff that we know is not of Jesus. So me entertaining GTA for such a long time, that was me feeding the desires of my flesh. So what does it look like to feed the Spirit of God? How are we feeding the Spirit of God in our life so we either know that the Spirit of God is always winning that fight? So the Spirit of God is always conquering us in our life in that part. And it's by feeding it. It's by reading the Bible. It's by worshipping here at church. When we have times in the music here, we can use this to worship and give all we have to God. To forget about the bills that we have to pay, to forget about the annoying conversations, the people at work, to all that stuff that clouds our mind. And when we get this great opportunity to learn about the Bible, even during worship when we sing, we can use multiple senses to focus on Jesus and give him the honour. Studying the Word is also incredibly helpful for feeding the Spirit of God in our life. So as we look to find our home in Jesus, remain in me and I'll remain in you, that promise from Jesus. So we're looking to find our home in Jesus. I want to finish by asking, what are you feeding? What's growing your roots? How are you growing deeper into the vine? So if we're letting things like Netflix feed our soul, then we can constantly tell you what sort of fruit we're going to produce. How can you be a follower of Jesus that produces the best fruit that you are capable of producing, that produces fruit that is naturally going to draw other people to you, that is naturally going to draw other people to Jesus? If you see those cool fruit trees, always something about when you drive past a fruit tree and you want to just grab the fruit off that tree. Like I know when I drive 2-car drives where I see some fruit trees, I always think, do you reckon someone would notice if I just grabbed a couple of oranges off that tree? Like, would they really miss that one? That's the kind of fruit that we produce, that people are attracted to it, that people really want other people to see Jesus. You see, we only get one shot at this life. We only get one shot at this life. And we don't want to waste it by being consumed by the world. It's so tempting to fall into the trap of wanting to indulge in everything the world has to offer. But we only get one shot at this life, and we want this world to be transformed by Jesus, and we want ourselves to be transformed by Jesus. The second song we sung was Lord Send Revival. And I love songs about revival. They're really cool, and I love that song. But when we sing about revival, we have to think what our lives need to actually look like if we truly want to see revival in our communities. And we need to think, well, if I lived my life like I do now, and everyone in my community lives life like they do now, will there be revival in my community? Or do I have to have an incredible heart for other people so that there will be revival? Do I have to have a heart where I'm constantly looking for who I can invite to church, who I can share the gospel with, who I can help when they're hurting to get revival in their life? So this is a constant struggle. Paul says in Romans chapter 7, as I'm about to close, and as we're about to have a time to reflect in communion. In the book of Romans, read this whole chapter, but there's this bit where he just goes back and forth a little bit. But he talks about this battle that sin has within him. And he says, just bear with me 2 seconds while I look for it. From verse 17, as it is no longer myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. He's talking about that desire of the flesh that's still within us, that's still within Paul, as he's now preaching the gospel to heaps of people. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. So this is such a wrestle, even for the Apostle Paul. If you feel bad because you've got a wrestle inside yourself, where you keep making the wrong decision, where you keep running away from God, the Apostle Paul had that same wrestle within himself. As he said, for I have a desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. But he goes on and he talks about Jesus. He talks about what Jesus has done, how Jesus was perfect. Jesus was the one that was able to live that perfect life. He was the one that was able to resist all the time. He was the one that was able not to feed the desires of his flesh and constantly feed the Spirit of God. And it's that Jesus that came into the world, that came down from heaven to free us from our sin. And because he knew that we were sinful, because he knew we feed our sinful nature all the time, he came into the world and lived a perfect life. He lived a life that was without sin. Not once did he sin. So he lived that perfect life. And because he lived that perfect life, he was able to be a sacrifice for all of our sins, a sacrifice for all the sins of the world. And he would give his life for us. And then 3 days later, he would defeat death by resurrecting and coming back from the dead. And all we have to do now is put our faith in him. So the main question I want to ask is, what are you feeding in your life? How can you be a better disciple that is more connected to Jesus? In just a moment, Josh is going to come up and he's going to lead us through communion. And communion is, again, another time where we can focus on Jesus, where we can remember that sacrifice Jesus made for us and ask for forgiveness. We're going to have that time of communion, and then Josh will explain, we're going to worship as well. And after that time, after we've had communion, I'm going to be standing over there. And if you want to be bold enough, if there's something in your life that you need prayer for, if there are things that you know that you need to be pruned in and you're just struggling to do it by yourself, if you're trying to live as that one branch that's on its own and you find you keep stumbling, you keep falling over, you keep taking your eyes off Jesus, then come and receive prayer. If you want prayer for anything in your life, come. Because that is one of the beauties of being in the local church. We have others connected to the vine. We're here, not just I'm the vine, we are the branch. But Jesus said, I'm vine, you are the branches. We're here to encourage and support one another. So if you want to seek prayer in that time, please come and I'll pray for you. And if you want to continue to talk about what needs to be pruned in your life, do that. And use this next time of worship after communion for that as well, to focus on those things, to focus on where you can make more room for Jesus in your life. Thanks, JD.